Hello, world. Welcome to the third instance of the ERC podcast. Today, we're honored to have Andre Archambault visiting us not too far. We're a few light rail stops away from each other.
That's right.
Um, we've met at networking groups and gatherings in the Hudson County area, and it's got a couple of decades of experience in media. One of the few folks who also have been in radio and transitioned over and kept with the times and has been educating me on different terms in the media space, digital media space, what SEO means, what SEM means, how is it different from traditional marketing. So I would like Andre for you to kind of introduce yourself a little bit.
Thanks, Joe. Really appreciate being on, especially inside the first, handful of episodes. Really flattering. So I appreciate that. Yeah. So I don't know anything. There are three things about which I know in this world: the media business, music, and baseball. Uh, and I spent the first 10 years of my career predominantly in in production, and primarily radio, as you pointed out, but I worked on a handful of TV shows and movies. Since we are connected via Hudson County, I figure it's worth mentioning I worked for most of season 5 on The Sopranos. A little bit of usually garners a fun story or two. And then made the transition into media sales, marketing, and advertising in 2004. And that transition wasn't as challenging as you might expect. The internet was, I'm certainly not a native the way many would be, but I think there's a benefit to my particular kind of seasoning for the fact that I remember a time before the internet. Very plainly, I remember first logging into my Prodigy account and then my CompUSA account or CompuServe account, that kind of a thing. And then sort of seeing those ecosystems grow, across the last 30 years has been it's been an interesting ride to say the least. And then I spent 2 years selling radio, but even there, the first CBS radio station that was streaming, and this obviously is a version of streaming if you think of it, was the station that I was at for 2 years, WCBS AM 880, formerly out of New York. They shut down that station, I think, 2 years ago. But what the big takeaway was that they leveraged the internet very, very heavily because they had 2 million listeners built in to the station, and so sending people to the website made a lot of sense, and there were a lot of assets you could leverage there. Then spent a year working for a media buying service in Union, New Jersey, so Union County. Meanwhile, I was living in Manhattan at the time, and then ended up spending 2 years with Yahoo. And the joke I make frequently is when Yahoo was still Yahoo. And then in 2010, I got recruited by a company called Reach Local. And at that point, Reach Local was a pre-IPO. I would stop short of calling them a startup because they were, at that point, they probably had all in. I was probably like employee number, 500 or so, and they had offices around the U.S., Australia, and the UK. But that was really the foundation of where I learned about the differences between organic search, paid search, other paid media, and then ended up working there for about 12 years. And about 4 years ago, left there and ended up working for a couple of startups that were similar in structure and style. So I've been around the digital domain for a long time. If I have a specialty, it is paid search. I've done a fair amount of SEO work as well, but then also a ton of paid social, meaning meta ads, TikTok ads, Reddit. I've got a campaign, got a couple of campaigns on Reddit at the moment, which is an interesting platform to run ads on, to say the
Yeah.
least. So, um, and I went out on my own and launched Clearly Now Media about a year and a half ago. I had a former client come to me and say, "Hey, I've got this, multifamily residential property, two apartment buildings, one in Newark and one in Philly, and they were looking to run some advertising and so paid search and SEO for those properties. And so I came in and sort of I was very much their agency of record for I think it was about a 6 month engagement that I worked with those guys.
That's great. Thanks for the background. I want to add a fourth thing that you're good at or have
Hmm.
background in. It wasn't just baseball, it wasn't just media, but also people skills. All right. Because we met at a happy hour. From there, I was like, Andre's a good person. I haven't worked with you yet, but sent you some people I could connect you with. And, I
Well,
think it's a
thank you.
very
Yeah,
competitive space.
I learned somewhat early on that networking in our format is very much a kind of a high contact, somewhat volatile sport for the fact that it is at the end of the day, it is a tonnage game. You know, there's that old adage about making cold calls to generate business being a numbers game. I was a decent cold caller when I had to do it. But at the end of the day, I'm much better on my feet, working a room, working a conference, a trade show, that kind of a thing. So I appreciate that call out very much.
Yeah, no, perfect. And that brings me to the first point I want to cover. ERC, we help businesses save on indirect spend. This requires us to know a little bit of the client's invoices and contracts and who they do business with and how much. So I think for me right now, it's tough to see anything cold or anything that people don't know me directly to be able to be like, oh, let me click on this and save on spend. It's 100% through referrals. Does it help having an online presence? Absolutely. I'm starting to see the fact that it does take multiple touches, so maybe having a few there. But for something like plumbing or something like electrician or something that's like very uh, obvious and I need it now, that's where SEO comes into play. That's where reviews online come to play. Can
Sure.
you talk a little bit about maybe like the spectrum on that with
Yeah, of
businesses?
course. The um, so if someone is looking for there's a little bit of a history lesson here. Maybe the best way to answer that. The purest answer before the history lesson is to understand that you need to make it easy for people to find you, right? So if you've got an emergency plumbing thing, my brother happens to be dealing with an emergency dentist issue, that kind of a thing. And literally, just before I got on here, I got a text from him saying I have to have this dealt with before the end of the week or whatever it was. And so, you know, if you've not done the heavy lifting, and some of it's heavier than others, it's not all heavy lifting, but if you haven't done the let's call it the medium lifting of establishing a baseline for your website, your map listings, any and all of the other sort of aspects of having a web presence, your website, your map listing, then it's going to be tough for people to find you. So that's the first thing, and that the name, address, phone number aspect of SEO is a critical aspect of that. But there are two or three other sort of pieces of SEO that deal with under the hood, usually behind the scenes within the website itself, having links to your site from other sites, that are verified and not junky. There was a time, here's some of that history lesson. There was a time where a lot of SEO was what they would call black hat and not necessarily above board. Some of that practice, I think some people still try to get away with it, but then if they get caught and dinged, they get dinged by Google and the other publishers. So there's, it's tough to do that. And the same applies to paid media. I'll get to that in a second. But having that foundational, making sure that the photos that are on your site are tagged correctly, making sure that all of the descriptions of the photos, images, other content on the site is tagged properly. That's all kind of foundational stuff for SEO. Where it gets, here's very much where that direct history lesson comes from. 20 years ago, Google Maps existed. It didn't really, until we moved into our phones, right? Maps didn't really matter that much. I remember 16 years ago printing out my MapQuest directions to go to a meeting on Staten Island. The one time I got a speeding ticket, mind you. I'm not kidding. And there's no wiggling out of that speeding ticket either. But I had MapQuest directions because it was about 6 months before I got a smartphone that could also do. But what I'm getting at is that the 15, 20 years ago, you couldn't run an ad campaign on maps. You couldn't run an ad. Waze didn't, barely existed. And so these platforms in the last couple of years, in the last 7 to 10 years, you can run ads on those maps for the things that you are looking to show for. But then you can also run ads within Google proper, Bing as well. I'm a fan of Bing. I haven't run a ton of campaigns on Bing, but generally speaking, a fan. If nothing else, the inventory, the click inventory is cheaper than Google. Google runs 70 some percent, 80% of search volume. So if the one guarantee about running ads on Bing is that it's going to be cheaper.
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
by sort of default. But you can run those campaigns, but in those instances, instead of structure matters there too, down to the types of keywords, the matches of the keywords that you use, and that may be a topic for better left for another day. There's a very specific piece of data and detail. And then the where you're landing that traffic that you're bidding on, that all of that matters, and that sort of makes up the structure of a paid search campaign versus SEO, where you're typically paying a subscription fee for someone instead of like on a pay per click basis. Most of your audience would have probably heard the term pay per click. Not a whole lot different than pay per view in a way, other than the fact that when you run a paid search campaign, you're bidding on very, very specific terms that you want to show for, going back to the emergency dentist or the emergency plumber, those kinds of things. Putting in the counties that you service, putting in the specific kinds of jobs that you service. That level of specificity matters. Did that answer your question, or did I
Yeah.
meander a little too
No.
much for you?
No, that's great. And just to to dig a little deeper, the follow on to that is, okay, I as a business owner have said let's invest in make sure our SEO is optimized and doing some paid media. Now I'm starting to ask my clients, hey, how'd you hear about me? Oh, I found you on Google Maps. Oh, I found you on Google, Bing, whatever it may be. How do you help navigate your current clientele through your quarterly reports or your monthly reports? You'd be
Sure,
like, oh, it sounds like people for whatever reason find you on Reddit. Let's double down there. Or you know what? Maybe SEO we're
sure,
missing out. The two men in a truck always are on top of the Google search. Let's
sure.
try another angle. So how do you navigate those conversations and
Yeah, I mean,
analysis?
it's an ongoing conversation for sure with all of my clients. Um, where um, my the cornerstone from, and this is a story I oftentimes will tell on podcasts like this. Um, I was the director of one of the few things I didn't mention is that I was the director of marketing for a mortgage company about 20, right around now, 20 years ago, and it was at the beginning of I would say kind of the beginning of the mortgage boom in the mid aughts that eventually led to what was the financial collapse, in '08, '09 timeframe. And in the particular instance with these guys, um, they had a vanity phone number, for example. It was 1-800-XYZ-PDQ-A, right? So we really couldn't tell where um, our calls were coming from. And we were spending about 100 grand a week on radio between from Miami up to Boston and kind of into New England as well. Um, and so every Sunday night, I would send out a spreadsheet to each office manager. And we were also spending in Spanish media. I would send out a spreadsheet to each office manager saying, these are the 3, 5, 7 radio stations that we're going to be running this week. Fill in the blanks accordingly, and then shoot that back to me Friday or Saturday, and I'll tally everything up. Typically, we would get anywhere from 12 to 1,500 phone calls for that 100 grand investment.
Because they would
Uh,
ask, they're like, "Did you hear me from the rate or whatever?" They'd be like,
exactly.
"Yes." Uh-huh.
And the Wall Street office and the Tampa, I think it was Tampa office, each, and maybe even the Morristown, New Jersey, Morris County office, would add a column for something that somebody else said. But meanwhile, there was I think all three of those offices said that they saw our ad on TV. We weren't running any TV.
Mm.
Right. So I don't personally put a ton of stock into where'd you hear about us. Um, I'm pretty good about it personally. When I go to the corner store or whatever it is, how'd you hear about us? Oh, Judy told me, or whatever it is. All right, yeah, here's your coupon that you sent out in the thing, or whatever it is. But for the most part, most people aren't necessarily reliable with that detail,
Mm.
and
Yeah.
it's a lived experience. That said, one of the big appeals to moving to mostly digital, 95% of my business today is digital, uh, is the fact that you can track from the click, from the publisher. Yeah, if you're running a campaign on Google versus a campaign on Bing, your analytics are going to show that accordingly. They're going to show wherever else. They're going to These days, even many of the analytic platforms are starting to show some of the inclusions in the LLMs, the AI, large language models, where people are finding everything from local to regional to national brands. A buddy of mine is running a campaign. Can't remember the category. I don't know if he even told me, but he's running a campaign on ChatGPT for quote unquote paid search. But it's a very different structural situation. You're not necessarily bidding on keywords, you're bidding on intentions, like the things that people are putting in to their queries into ChatGPT. How are those getting, what kinds of queries generate what kind of results that would also include a paid search, sponsored ad, so to speak. So but a lot of this can be everything from call tracking, having unique phone numbers on each medium that you are running on. Obviously, having a main phone number is always a good thing, but then the next 6 to 12 for this for the same reason that people aren't great about remembering the detail of where they saw your ad or saw your brand or saw the truck on the road or whatever, they're also not great. They don't necessarily need the same phone number for your office or business. So if you have a main number and maybe 5 to 10 tracking numbers for paid search, paid social, organic down the line, that sort of helps clarify a lot of where your traffic is coming from. The other piece of it is that within specifically Google Analytics, but some of the other analytic platforms do this too, they will tell you this person came in via paid search here, but then they finally submitted a form via organic. They came back to you, or
Mhm.
even direct traffic. So
Yep.
taking that data and modeling it and saying, oh, so we paid for the first visit, but then the ensuing 3 to 5 visits. To your point around multiple touches, that is one of those instances.
Yeah, because I see the two worlds that I can imagine you grappling with. One is when you ask someone, you heard about us, you can't take it, 100% accuracy there. It's lived experience. Two, uh, it usually takes multiple touches. So even though you did the paid search and you did the SEO and you do your content, eventually they saw your billboard on the highway and then they called you.
Right.
So it's like, and it's not that say, oh, it was a waste of money to do SEO or paid. It was just that was part of the journey to encourage or motivate the client to finally give you a call. So it's piecing it together. There's some art to the science. But again, for the listeners, for small to medium sized businesses who want to grow, it may take some tinkering, it may take some experimentation, seeing what's sticking, see what's not. I liked a few things I heard from you, which is having different phone numbers depending on different media that you're trying, so that this phone came from here. That's the phone number we used on the, I don't know, the lifestyle magazine in Bergen County. Great. Or in the coupon you send in the mail, you have, a code that was sent for, you did an A or B test or something. Now you're getting all the A's coming back with calls. Okay, that's interesting. I feel these are all great things for small business to, consult with an expert, but this is just like planting the seeds along the way.
Yeah, very much. I mean, some of this stuff can be, it's a little bit of a red herring to say it this way, but when Google brought Google Ads to market 25 plus years ago, 27 years ago, they really built it to be self-serve so that anyone, and technically anyone can, but the reality is that um, it's highly complex. It's difficult to learn that platform and the other platforms to ensure that you're doing it right. I encourage people to give it a shot, but then 7 out of 10 times they'll end up coming to me or somebody like me and saying, how do I refine this? Can I do? And I do that kind of work all the time too.
That's great. That's great that you're open for it because, some have minimums or some don't do consulting, some are only retainer. Sometimes you got to be open minded to
Yeah,
build your niche. One topic I do want to get into is now how AI has impacted all this. I think before, if I was a small business owner, let's say a moving company, I need to hire a designer or else I do Microsoft Paint and it looks, anything I'm making digitally, it doesn't look great. It's hard to make content. Now
sure,
you can make content. There's Claude Design, there's Nano
sure.
Banana on Google, you can make some, but I think the art to deploying content is something that's still missing. Like we're not still there yet where I go, I don't know, aimarketing.com and I'm like, just help me save. I do see the value in having someone in your corner and coach you along the way. What are your
Yeah,
thoughts
yeah.
on AI
So
there?
the sort of the short and sweet answer to all of this is that so much of it is TBD, to
Mm,
be determined. Um, not It's also kind of a cop out answer. The reality is that AI is impacting. Um, it's impacting paid. It's impacting organic because people aren't necessarily using search engines the way they used to. They're using the LLMs, ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, for longer threads, longer instead of having keywords, they're actually doing full-on sentence searches, queries, whatever. Um, there's On the paid side, you have what are called zero-click searches, where the answer in the AI overview is so strong that the person doesn't need to click any of the sponsored links or organic links for that matter. They get their answer and off they go. Having said that, that user experience, that frictionless or least amount of friction, is really what Google and the other publishers have always been about, right? So when you need them, you should be able to go back to them and get quick, easy answers to the things that you're trying to find. The challenge is that the market is racing to meet the rest of the AI demand in terms of organic and paid. But to directly answer your creative question, no doubt the creative landscape is changing dramatically and it's already been impacted and will continue to be, I think, the most impacted of all of the digital media over the next 3 to 5 years, if not a lot sooner.
yeah, maybe because it's more straightforward and say, hey, I just want to make a flyer or I just want to make a quick video, those. But in terms of how do I launch an effective campaign to boost my sales 5%, with X ROI, there's different mediums. If you
Yeah,
ask the Facebook LM, it won't tell you how to do the Reddit campaign, but
sure.
maybe you can piece things together. So in closing thoughts, Andre, I want you to do two things. One is help maybe add a couple nuggets of information for these small and medium-sized businesses that may be dialing in, and then two, how people can find you.
Sure. Probably the biggest takeaway you should take from this conversation that, frankly, I've barely scratched the surface is data. Data,
Mm,
data, data. Own your own data. Own your first party data. When somebody comes in and buys something from you, or you uh, make some sort of a transaction, roofing contract or plumbing, whatever, make sure you have their email address and that's attached to um, a physical address so that you can market to those folks after the fact. Everything from reviews all the way up to future business. So data, data, data. And then number two, AAA at clearlynowmedia.com is where you can find me if you want to find me. And clearlynowmedia.com is my URL. And then you can also reach me at 646-541-7831.
excellent. Andre, you've been awesome. I appreciate your time
Likewise.
and hope you have a great rest of your week.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Little post notes. Wanted to share with folks what I take away from it. I just really enjoyed speaking with Andre. It's important to have an expert in your corner to help you with making sure that every dollar you're putting into marketing goes a long way. The world with generative AI is shifting on strategies and keywords, and SEO is something you invest in month over month or year over year. And yeah, I mean, he's got a wealth of knowledge, and I love learning from him and networking with him. So if you got any questions, Andre is your guy. Have a great day.